Social constructionism is the idea that social categories and the behaviors associated with them come from society. Social structures are patterns or institutions in society like law, economy, politics, religion, or even language. Throughout history, many people have seen sexuality as a product of human biology, something exclusively overseen by nature, without the influence of society. But when we take a closer look, we see that every aspect of sexuality is created by social structures.
In the history of sexuality, Michel Foucault explains that our desires are created by our social environment, and what sexual thoughts and acts are acceptable depends on the dominant culture. The way in which we do this is through acts of power. Foucault talks about two main types of power, repressive and productive. Repressive power is the power that says no, essentially stopping people from doing certain things. Productive power is the opposite, power that says yes, and this is what produces desires, behaviors, and identities.
Gail Rubin elaborates on this with the concept of the charmed circle. Here, the sex that follows social norms is called charmed and placed on the inside of the circle. The outer part of the circle is the sex that breaks norms and is seen as wrong or even immoral. Anyone involved with a bad sex is usually punished, either formally through the legal system or informally through discrimination and judgment. Where do we learn about good and bad sex? One answer is schools. The educational system not only teaches us English and math, children also learn unspoken rules about how to do heterosexuality the right way as part of a hidden curriculum. The hidden curriculum is anything students learn that is not a part of the formal curriculum. Since students rarely learn formal sex ed in school, sexual knowledge is exchanged between students at lunchtime or recess. When homosexuality is hidden from students via teachers being punished or fired for not being straight, they don't learn about homosexual people.
One example of how we socially construct sexuality is the creation of homosexuality as an identity. Here in the United States, same-sex sex was an act one did, not who one was. It was still on the outer edges of Rubin's circle, but the stigma around it came from religious institutions, primarily Christian churches, that offered repentance for sinners who engaged in sexual activity with someone of the same sex. It wasn't until psychiatric medicine started labeling this same-sex sexual activity as inversion or homosexuality, and the person someone had sex with determined what kind of person they were.
As previously stated, homosexuality wasn't an identity, and same-sex sex were just acts that people did that were considered a sin. In an agricultural economy, homosexuality was not an option. People had to marry someone of the opposite sex and have children. These children would be expected to work as farmhands to keep the family afloat. Survival was dependent on being able to run a farm and live off the land. A capitalist economy opened the door to identifying as homosexual. Eva Illouz discussed the idea of a romantic love and the freedom to marry whoever you wanted. The beginning of capitalism ended arranged marriages that depended on survival. This marriage based on love instead of procreation opened the doors for same-sex marriage and a gay identity.
In more modern times, Western gay rights activists rallied to bring gay rights to the world. While their intent was to free their fellow community members from oppression, not all cultures outside of the U.S. have the same social value and concepts of sexuality as Americans. Joseph Massad, in Reorienting Desires, describes the problem with this. Trying to liberate what activists saw as closeted gays and lesbians from oppression, they actually forced their own ideas of sexuality on people who didn't have an idea of gay identity. From these socially constructed ideas, governments in some of these areas then began to criminalize and stigmatize homosexuality and other queer identities in a new way. Massad explains by inciting discourse about homosexuals where none existed before, the Gay International is in fact heterosexualizing a world that is being forced to be fixed by a Western binary.
You may notice that labels and words play a huge role in defining who we are. Meg John Barker and Ani Ritchie explains language and polyrelationships, explaining that society gives us a narrow vocabulary when it comes to sex. It only covers the inner part of the charm circle. If you're involved in any sex on the outer limits, you may have to invent your own language and sexual scripts for your community. Anyone who isn't in the inner circle has their existence erased and ignored by language that doesn't include them. However, there is a positive side to the way in which sexuality is socially constructed through language. If there is no current language to describe your relationship or sexuality, then you get to create it as you go. It may take extra explaining and some work, but once the foundation is made, it is possible to build a community. Creating a new term also ensures that there is no baggage associated with this new language. It is often hard to reclaim old words that have been insults to you, but coming up with new words allow you to get rid of that specific baggage.
Language, economy, law, religion, and medicine are all intertwined to create a set of rules about sex that an individual must follow to be considered an acceptable, healthy, and normal member of society. Following these sexual rules and being a good person is a little like walking a tightrope. If any of these many norms are violated, it can result in severe consequences like jail, shame, or even violence. Understanding sexuality as socially constructed does not make it any less real. It simply highlights the conflicting and arbitrary views that we hold. The concept of what is appropriate sexual behavior has been created to place people on a social hierarchy. By challenging society's views on sexuality, we can create new, positive norms of healthy sexual encounters, shame-free identities, and a deeper understanding of sexuality as a whole.